Kia ora tātou, nau mai, haere mai. Morena everyone, and good morning. Welcome to our council meeting of Wednesday, the 3rd of May, 2023. If I could just ask Councillor Fitzgerald to open with karakia, thank you.
Mr Mayor. Ngā mihi o te ata ki a tātou i te whare, i te chambers, tēnā koutou, me karakia tātou. Tū taua mai I runga, tū taua mai I raro, tū taua mai I roto, tū taua mai I waho. Kia tau wai, te mauri tū, te mauri ora, ki te katoa, haumi e, hui e, tāiki e. Mr Mayor, thank you.
Kia ora, Councillor, thank you. Again, good morning everyone, and look, just want to acknowledge that this meeting is being recorded. It's being live streamed on our Council's YouTube channel in terms of health and safety for those in the gallery, and of course councillors and staff. In the unlikely event of an emergency, we would evacuate to the clock tower area in Te the square through the closest marked fire exits. The building is non-smoking and we have, unlike the event of a defibrillator required, that is in front of house on the ground floor. Any incidences, please speak to our committee administration, and the toilets are in the link span as you came through. All right, through to number 2 on our order paper, and that is our apologies, and we will resolve to receive apologies from the Deputy Mayor for lateness. She's on council business, and Councillor Wood for early departure.
Mr Mayor.
I'm sorry.
Early departure too, please, Mr Mayor.
Okay, and early departure for Councillor Fitzgerald. I'm happy to move those, seconded by Councillor Hancock. No comments. We will vote, please. And that is passed, 15 votes for and none against. Thank you. Notifications of any additional items or late items. I have none. There's none from the floor. We'll move through to declarations of interest. Again, I haven't been notified of any, I think, from the floor. That's good. Okay, we move through to number 5, which is our public comment. And we have Margaret Cavalis here, who's the chairperson of the New Zealand Rural Games Trust. Welcome, Margaret. Do you wish to comment on one of our future, number 7, one of our future papers?
Kia ora tātou, Your Worship the Mayor and Councillors, it's great to be here again, and it goes without saying that we're enormously proud to hold the Games here in the city, and I think they were the best yet. And they're that because of the support that we get from all our sponsors, but also primarily from you. And I do want to take this opportunity to thank the Council, every one of you, the Mayor, tremendous support, Chief Executive, all your team, and the councillors for the support we receive. You'll have seen the paper, and basically I really only want to address one or two things. First of all, I want to say that the coverage that we're now getting from Television New Zealand, particularly TV3, has been tremendously encouraging, and the relationship that we have with Sports Inc. has been what's enabled us to have that 1 hour before Easter. In fact, there are 2 one-hour programs. And we also, from time to time, do get on the Television 1 and 3 6 o'clock news, which is something to be said for an event of this size in Palmerston North. So being able to live stream it and get the tremendous coverage for the city is something that we hold very dear. The second thing I think you'll all agree is that the dinner held on the Friday night is unique. And I know His Worship the Mayor and I have been to many of these dinners over our lifetimes, and without doubt this is the best one as far as I'm concerned, but it's the accolades that have come in this time from, and every time, but this time in particular, have been extraordinarily encouraging. Again, it's a national face for Palmerston North to have so many people from throughout the country. We could have that anywhere in New Zealand, to be honest, that dinner, but here is so important, associated with the Games and with Norwood. And the other thing is simply to say that we do all this because we want to preserve the heritage of our games that built the nation. In particular, these were the jobs that people had. And I think in the time of post-COVID that we're recovering the values that we had from our ancestors. And there's something extraordinarily wholesome about going around and taking part in these games. And there is pressure, and I'll just say this, from people like Steele to have just championships and to elevate it all to championships. And we've fought against that with all the, we've said, no, we want to have the public able to participate. So that enormous part of Have a Go, where people feel from, the age of 4 right up to 94 that they can take part. That's really important, and that's important for the health of all of us at the moment. So there's a tremendous goodwill and well-being factor. I feel that that's the part I'm most passionate about when I see the families coming and the little children taking part, loving it. And I'll be flying my own family up next year because I'm getting harassed by 5-year-old Fergus in Dunedin as to Granny, why can't I be there? So that's the kind of thing that makes me delighted. And then the other thing, of course, is that leads on to possible food and fibre opportunities in that sector for young people. So the agri-futures is huge. And this, I do want to impress on you, is going on now all year round. So that we've appointed Daniel, who was with me last time, in that full-time capacity. He's developed a wonderful advisory team around him of some of the stunning agribusiness teachers in New Zealand, and Massey University is involved in that. But that, of course, is being funded hugely by MPI and MSD. So that part aside. So the two things that we've really come to you asking for is that additional 15,000, and also we are looking at that 5-year contract. I know this is something that probably is difficult for you to envisage or to entertain. However, the games already go all year round in terms of the preparation, and I can tell you now that Steve rang me last week to say that the dinner's already sold out, 50 tables gone already. Now that's just unheard of. That's the sort of thing we're having to deal with, and so we do need to preserve the contracts of the people, the very good people we have, and the 3 years just seems to go like that. So the 5 years does build that certainty. I don't think there's any other place in the country that could hold these games in the centre as we do here, and I so want it. That's part of my legacy wish, and I'm sure yours, that we keep something of this nature here in Palmerston North. So thank you all very much again. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Margaret. I'll allow, there's a couple of quick questions, I'll allow those, but then we'll go on to other items. Councillor Harper online.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Mark. Just a couple of quick questions. One was about the TV coverage. Do you know exactly how many hours we actually get from TV3, Mark?
I do, but I couldn't quote it now. They're there all the time for the games. I'm not sure. I can get that information for you from Daniel. It's in his report.
So do we have to pay for any of that, Mark?
No.
Okay. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Margaret. Just one question as to whether or not you're seeking additional funding from all of your funders or just from local government funders?
Mainly from all of our funders in terms of every year we do because of the costs that have gone up increasingly, but predominantly from this council for what, as you'll see, we've longed to have.
Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Margaret, for your continued enthusiasm. The report that we'll be considering identifies that in the areas around our eco-city goals, so lifting the water of the Manawatu River, reducing emissions, et cetera, that there's kind of still work to do from this event to have a clear contribution there. Just interested if that's your view as well, and if you have any thinking about practically how that might be delivered.
Absolutely, Councillor Barrett, and actually we had a meeting on Sunday night and that was the topic that we're dealing with as well. So we're very conscious of that, very committed to that. Thank you for raising it.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, thank you, councillors. Look, we'll put the resolution up there. Thank you, Margaret. We have the resolution to receive the public comment for information. I'm happy to move that, seconded by Councillor Hancock. Right, we'll put that to the vote, please. That's passed, 15 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right, number 6 is just confirming the minutes from the last meeting, the 5th of April. 5th of April 2023, be confirmed as a true and correct record, but there is a slight amendment, and it's a correction of clause 5223 around Freedom Drive Road Reserve as follows, and that council approve the dedication of the current local purpose reserve road described as lot 44400 DP 559569, sorry, lot 400 DP 559569, which is owned by the Palmerston City Council as road within the Freedom Drive subdivision, and that's pursuant to Act 111 of the Reserves Act 1977. So it's just a admin, but it's important that we get that right because of the DP numbers, etc. So I'm happy to move those, seconded by Councillor Bowen. Are there any matters arising? Being none, we will vote, please. That has passed, 15 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right, we move through to number 7, which is around in response to the public comment here as well, and there's a report, funding report request on the New Zealand Rural Games Trust, and I'll ask that Luke McIndoe, our Head of Events, speak to this paper, please. Page 19 of your papers, councillors.
Okay, good morning. I'm happy to take the report as read. The main things from us is that this has come to you as the request from the New Zealand Rural Games Trust sits outside the current support and funding policy, so it's a decision for elected members. We've presented some possible options for how to proceed, but we are cognisant of the precedent that this may set, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks. And a couple of questions. Councillor Barden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wasn't quite expecting to be first cab off the rank there. Thank you, Luke, for the report. My first question, there might be more, was about the economic impact assessment, which you've identified contributing to an assessment of partial support for the promotion of domestic tourism and increased visitor nights. Now, I was under the impression that we did economic impact assessments as normal, so can you explain for me why this hasn't had one and what the process would be to put that in if we needed it?
Yep, through the chair. So the process for that, we have a tool that we can use internally. There are some certain measures that we need to get from events to make sure we can appropriately assess. Some of those measures have been missing in the past, so that's something that we're working with, that we work with all our major events that receive funding. So that would be a conversation with the Trust to make sure we receive all that information so the impact report is accurate and complete.
And similarly then with the Priority Showcase Palmerston North's Unique Story, which has also received a partial assessment, and that seemed from the report and also from the public comment to be one of the things that the Rural Games is presenting as strong on is that connection, that rural-urban connection, that history. So how is that a partial success there?
It's a partial success for how the support policy is currently set up. Absolutely agree with, it does have a good tie-in with the city's story, but it's an assessment against the policy.
Okay. Thank you. I'll leave that there. Thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I was also going to ask about economic impact assessment, so that's got that ticked off. I'm just interested to know how it is that we have funded this as a major event without having an economic impact assessment, because my understanding of the major events funding was that meeting that economic impact was a criteria of getting funding from the fund.
As it stands, a lot of the information has been self-reported. So a more robust analysis needs to be undertaken. So on paper, looks, that the criteria has been met, but officer opinion is that it needs a more robust assessment.
And do you need direction through council to do that?
The previous contract was put in place before the new support and funding policy, so now we are now in a much better place with contracts going forward. So it's a bit of a, it's in a bit of a gap at the moment, I guess, but any contracts going forward would be a lot more robust in that space.
So if funding were to be approved today, we could be sure that an economic impact assessment would be done?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then the other question is about the increase that's been requested. So in 2.2 you've said it's currently 60k cash and 25k in-kind support. Mm-hmm. In terms of the increase, which is quite significant on a percentage basis, would you be able or expecting to see different outcomes or improved outcomes? Or is that just, I guess, can you give us your opinion about the size of the increase that's been requested and whether or not that would lead to any increased or different outcomes?
Well, that's quite a difficult one. This event is quite a bit larger than other events that we do support through the Major Events Fund. It's one of those kind of assessments that we make as these requests come through into the Major Event Fund. Sorry, I'm not sure if that answers your question at all.
Maybe there isn't an answer. That's fine. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There's a lot of questions now. Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. Thanks. The first question I've got is the program 1344. What is the size of that program?
The current in the long-term plan, it'll be 284 annually.
So what is it this year?
This year it's 204.
Okay, thank you. And is that fully allocated this year?
This year it's fully allocated.
Yep. Okay, and in terms of the policy, support and funding policy, if the policy didn't have that $30,000 limit, how would this be assessed? Would this be funded fully under that policy if there wasn't the limit?
I can't really make that call. It's assessed by a panel of assessors, including officers and a CEDA representative, so I don't really want to prejudge that process.
Okay, and just my final question is the 15,000 additional money, what is specifically that for?
It hasn't been tagged to anything in particular. It's it's the request that's come through from the trust.
So if that additional money wasn't funded, we don't know what the impact of that. Do you know what the impact of that would be?
No, we haven't been informed.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Isabella.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Luke. Excuse me. Just wondering if we had any kind of headcount data for how many people we had come through the square for the games just been?
Informal counts were estimated between 30 and 40,000. Again, that's another thing that could have a bit more robustness around it.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Mr Mayor, thanks Luke for your report. A couple of questions about the contestable funding. Is the $25,000 in-kind support, does it come out of that same pot of money?
It does at the moment. That's the way the contract was set up. And it's a very similar approach that we take to other major events. Yes, yeah.
Now just lastly, Luke, do you have a view on the impact for the other major events if we were to approve the extra $15,000 today?
No, not really. We'd just have to wait and see what came through. Yeah.
Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I have three questions. The financial things have been asked well and truly now, but TV and radio, does any other event in the city get anywhere near the publicity that the Rural Games get as far as TV and radio goes?
For this type of event?
For any
probably
event,
not.
really?
There are a few sporting, the professional sporting events that get similar, but no, this is pretty unique, this one.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Yeah. The other one is the numbers. You said how many thousand, 25, 30,000 went through it? Do anything else we have compared with that?
No.
Does it? Okay. And the other thing which is really interesting to me is when the Rural Games are held on, it's not just the games itself, it's the days before, the days after. People seem to stay on, don't they?
There's definitely some anecdotal evidence that some of the competitors and all the kind of, the suppliers and wraparound support for the whole event are here before and after. Again, that would be part of an economic assessment to get that true impact of visitors.
How far away do you think that economic assessment will be?
It depends on how long it takes to gather the information.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just jump in. There's a lot of questions around the economic impact. We do receive a report, or I've seen a report, haven't we, which does include some financials.
It does.
And some data and some indicative stats, but it's not in our format.
Correct.
And perhaps lacks a little bit of third-party independence. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thanks, Luke. Just a question around impact assessment. Do we run a system of impact assessment that also looks at contribution to strategic aims across our 4 goals, or is it really just about kind of dollars and bums on seats kind of stuff?
The way this fund is set up is it's primarily an economic impact fund, but it does have elements that hit other well-beings. So that the way we look at it is across the local government well-being. So we look at the social well-being as well as economic.
That's in terms of making the funding decision, or in terms of reporting impact at the end?
Both.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Harper online.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and thank you, Luke. Just one question around the contractor wanted to have a 5-year term. What would be the impact of the 5-year term and this request?
Might ask the Chief Executive to answer that one for me.
Yes, through the chair, if council decided to go with a 5-year contract, then you're locked into that, into your budget process for the remaining 5 years.
Thank you. Second question, do we have any other contracts that are on a 5-year term of this nature?
Definitely not in the major events fund.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to understand the journey we've been on funding-wise to get here. So when the game started 7 years ago, did we provide support funding from the beginning?
That predates my time a little bit, but my understanding is there was some conversations between the city and the trust to bring the games up from Queenstown, and funding was definitely part of that conversation on how the city could support and ensure the games were brought to the city.
And so the $60,000 cash contribution we make, we've been on for 3 years. Was there a 3-year contract, I assume, before that, where we were contributing $60,000, or was it a lower figure?
I'd have to confirm that figure for you. I haven't got it in front of me, but it definitely wasn't that amount.
So there have been increases periodically over the course of the contract so far?
That is my understanding, but I'd need to go back and
I
confirm
appreciate
it
that.
for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Look, my question is probably just a little bit sort of just around process. If we took option 2 as the example of terms of our options going forward, there's a request for an additional $15,000 per annum over 5 years. So some questions have been asked around the economic benefit and whether or not there's any cost analysis in terms of future needs. I'm just wondering if that information would be available for the annual budget deliberations in May, June.
Through the chair, we can work with the trust to try and pull that together, but I think that's achievable.
Thank you, Luke. Mr Mayor.
Oh, Councillor Bowen, you've popped back in again.
Sorry, Mr Mayor, just a thought triggered by Councillor Hancock's question. Luke, on option 2 and option 3, doesn't say 3, but 3, which is to refer a new programme of up to 100k, there isn't a corresponding reduction, that's 100k new money on top of the existing programme. So it doesn't reduce the existing programme by the amount of money that's currently allocated to, do you see what I mean? Yeah. We're having double.
So through the chair, that's option 4 there. One of the options is that we reduce the programme 1344 to move that 100,000 out to support the games.
Sorry, I've probably not explained that very clearly. The 100k is an increase. So surely if we're referring a new programme, it doesn't need to be...
It needs to be a new programme.
Yes.
Rather than
but
reducing.
Does it need to be 100k is what I'm asking? No, we need 60k.
That's the request that the Games has made.
So if we put a new programme in that takes the Games funding out of the Major Events Fund, but we also leave the Major Events Fund as it currently is, which is increasing to 284, that's
Correct.
Effectively a rounding about 150k increase to major events across those two funds.
That would be one option that you could look at.
Thank you.
So could I get that clear? So so option 4 is to create a new fund of 100,000 as per the request, and for a period of 5 years, and not refer it to any budget, to any deliberations.
Correct. It would reduce program 1344, and the 100,000 would be a new program to solely support rural games.
Okay, all right, okay. So that actually does reduce as well, okay.
Correct.
All right, okay, that explains it. Thank you, gets it clear in my mind. All right, thank you, Luke. That's the questions have been had. Thank you very much. Thank you for your paper. So, councillors, we have the 4 options. I'm happy to move option 2, which is referring the request to our annual budget deliberations. I'll look for a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hancock. If I could just speak to it briefly. Look, I think that those that attend this will know that there is an enormous amount of people and activity. I think we're probably at fault ourselves, and it's probably a joint oversight that there isn't a more robust economic impact, because I think it it would tease out some of those lingering questions for some of you. And perhaps also for one or two questions around, does it support our goals? And I think that would be teased out as well. We can do that in the deliberations, and it sounds like an economic impact, or even if it is a shorter version, could be given to us as well for those decisions. Look, the policy, I'm not going to go there. I never voted for it. I think it's appalling. It's too low. And you're going to get lots of this going forward as people come off contracts, because our settings are inconsistent with other major events around the country. That aside, I do think this event is worthy of, for all the reasons that the in public comment were given to us. It does bring out, we're one of the few cities in New Zealand that is still connected to the land. Hamilton is another one. It fits with our agribusiness strategy. It fits with our supporting some of our key organisations that are here, whether it be universities, whether it be food organisations, whether it be our wider farming community, whether it be some of our businesses. I think the big indicator is the amount of support that it gets externally via either government or commercial sponsors. And many of them are our people as well. So our people are supporting it. So does the city support it? I think we should at least have this debate more fully in the annual plan deliberations. Effectively, they're asking for $15,000 more because we already do 60,000, and a big part of that 25k is taken up with council resources and other things that we do around Te Maraehine, the square, the recycling and waste management, road closures, etc., etc. So I hope you can support this at least to go to the deliberations, and we can get a bit more information from our team in the trust, and we can then go to a final decision on it. I'll open it up for comments. Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm going to support this recommendation, absolutely. I think we need to take a step back and position ourselves what's important to the city. And as far as our tourism priorities, events are one of our pillars as far as emphasising to create the economic benefit. We don't have vineyards, we don't have lakes, but we can produce events. Take a step down from that, rural games. Is that a strategic positioning for us to be the rural capital of New Zealand? Absolutely, it's worked well, it suits us, and we should commit to it on a longer term basis, and I'm happy with the slight adjustment in that. We had this similar debate last month with the food awards, and I think we should just take a step back and actually work out what is important, and instead of having this tinkering year by year, get in boots and all and position ourselves fully to realise the full benefit. It seems a pretty straightforward decision for me, but I feel that work needs to happen if we're guessing this at this point. So I think that event forum, Luke, would be important for us to fully understand what these produce for our city. So I'm absolutely in for it, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I will definitely support this. I also would have supported option 4. I believe that this event probably is really becoming one of the most iconic events we have in our city. When you go down there and you see the crowds, you see the involvement of people, the children who are playing and getting to drive diggers and goodness knows what, there's nothing else like it anywhere in New Zealand. The amount of TV and radio time this city got for the rural games is incredible, and nothing else compares with it that we do other than a rugby game which would last for a day. Anyone who listens to News Talk ZB would know that for at least a week before the games, the rural program, all they talked about was being in Palmerston North and what was going to happen in Palmerston North. The amount of publicity and good publicity we got from the rural games, you couldn't buy it, and $15,000 wouldn't buy one iota of that advertising. So that alone is well worthwhile. I believe that if we could lock this in for another 5 years, by accepting this and saying this is an iconic event for the next 5 years, our city will benefit financially. It would benefit its reputation, because everything you hear about the rural games around the country is positive. That's one of the best positive things that we have about Palmerston North, is our rural games. And I said our rural games, because let's make it the home of the rural games. Let's make Palmerston North iconic for the rural games. Thank you.
Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Happy to support this, although, you know, probably my personal preference around the investment level would be more around the 85 and kind of seeing how the games go in terms of really balancing up that strategic alignment across all four of our goals. But certainly happy to just continue that debate in the annual budget deliberations. The main reason I wanted to comment was that I actually feel that the policy that we've put in place is working quite well. This is a great place to be discussing this, and actually quite a good use of council time, in my view. Leads to a little bit of political grandstanding here and there about, you know, various different aspects. But overall, let's make these decisions here. I think the policy is working very well, and I am tiring a little bit of seeing it continually blamed for things coming into the chamber when actually this is our job to make these kind of decisions. It's a policy that council's put in place. Let's just use it.
Councillor Johnson.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I mean, I must say that I do enjoy rural games, and I've attended it every year that it's been here, and I think it's a great event. So we'll start there. I do have some concerns, though, about the precedent that this sets. We have limited funds. We have gone through our budgets this year and pared back lots of stuff, and yet here we are contemplating what I calculate to be a 25% increase in funding for this event. That seems to be a very large increase to me. Without us seeing what the corresponding increase is for commercial sponsors for other councils, I'm concerned about locking us in for 5 years. I mean, if the last few years have taught us anything, they've taught us that things can change quite rapidly. And committing future councils to this level of funding for 5 years, I'm a bit concerned about. I'm also not happy that we haven't got a robust economic impact assessment. It's not clear to me whether that's whether there's a lack of information coming forward from the group themselves, or whether we just haven't done the work. But in either case, without a robust economic impact assessment, I think it's quite hard to sell this as needing such a large investment from council. So the other thing I'm a little bit concerned about with this recommendation is I don't see a corresponding reduction in the major events fund. So if this is a totally new programme that's being set up for rural games, then there should be an equivalent reduction in the major events fund. Otherwise, there's an extra 60,000 in the major events fund that will no longer be used for rural games. So for all of those reasons, I'm not going to support this option, although I expect it will succeed, and I'll look forward to debating it again in the annual budget.
Councillor Harper.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I fully support this recommendation. I think that what Councillor Dennison and what Councillor Finlay said, I totally support. I think this is an iconic event for the city. I think option 2 is the best option to go forward with so that it can be deliberated in the annual budget. I also agree with what the contractor said in terms of the value that it's brought for the TV coverage that we got and we didn't have to pay for our city. I think that's so invaluable, and we're so lucky to have got all of that TV coverage. Palmy does not have the best reputation in New Zealand, and to get that free coverage, we are very, very lucky to get that kind of coverage on any TV media without having to pay for it. So well done to the Rural Games, well done to the Rural Games Trust for all the hard work they do, and we should be complimenting them for their hard work, for what they do for our city, for putting us up on the pillar that they put us up on as a city. So thank you very much for all your hard work. I'm fully supportive of what you've done for this event, and I fully champion it, so thank you very much. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. As others have mentioned, totally recognise the value of the rural games to our city and support its continuation. However, option 2, I've got a couple of concerns about. Sorry, just trying to get my papers back in front of me. One of the big issues I have with option 2 is the commitment that locks us into for 5 years. In our papers, it says that it should be noted that should electors agree to this option as a part of the annual deliberations, it will also be committing council in the following 4 years of the long-term plan. Now, I think that's quite premature for us to be locking something in at this point, when none of us have seen the financial forecast of what our LTP looks like. And there's going to be some significant challenges in that, particularly with the Three Waters deferral till 2026. And we don't understand yet, we have not seen yet the full impact of that, and so we don't know what money we have to spend. So I would go as far as saying that this is perhaps a little bit irresponsible for us to be locking things in at this point. I'm happy to refer something for our annual budget process. I would prefer that we do that via the third option, which actually refers that for us to consider in the 23-24 deliberations in May and June. But I think it's not wise at all for us to commit to something that we have no understanding of how we would pay for that. So I won't be supporting this. If it fails, I would like to propose that we progress option 3, and I'd be looking to for a seconder for that.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I'm just going to comment just very briefly. And that's really just around, I accept both Councillor Naylor and Councillor Johnson's comments that, this is actually a 25% increase. However, hence my question really around ensuring that by the time we actually go to annual budget, we have some more information around cost analysis in terms of future needs of the Trust and also around the economic benefits for Palmerston North City. So, with that information, we should be able to make a coherent decision in terms of funding going forward for the New Zealand Games, Rural Games. This is a marquee event and very, very important on our calendar. So let's not veto it, torpedo it at this point. Let's give it a chance. Thank you.
Councillor McLeod.
Oh, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just rising to also speak in favour of this recommendation before us. I think Palmerston North is a regional city that is at the centre of a strong and prosperous rural heartland of New Zealand. And I think it's important for us that we support events of this nature. And speaking from an economic perspective, economic development perspective, while I actually share the concerns that have been expressed by some of my councillors, fellow councillors, around the economic impact assessment, but we've got some real good assurance from our officers that this can be done prior to the next contract being signed or being locked into a next contractual agreement. And the rural game does bring a lot of benefits to our city. It's now well established as a national event that adds creativity and vibrancy to our city, and also supports us with, community well-being, and also contributes to the prosperity of Palmerston North. And if we want to be the creative and exciting city that we want to be, or that we aspire to be, and we want to develop and grow events in Palmerston North, then we need to support events such as these, because they do contribute in terms of giving us an opportunity to celebrate our agricultural heritage, and also the TV coverage that we get from it as well does promote Palmerston North to the world. It shares a lot and tells a lot about our culture and what we're all about in Palmerston North. And this will stop also, when we get events such as this in Palmerston North, it creates the vibrancy and excitement of the city. And we've heard a lot of people say that Palmerston North, there's not much happening in Palmerston North. Now, these sort of events help take those sort of doubts away from such thinking. So I'm really happy to support this, and I think it's a great event, and we should support this. And it contributes to, our domestic tourism. It contributes to economic development, and it also promotes Palmerston North's unique identity to the world. And I'm really happy to support this. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So a couple of things in Margaret's report that sung out to me was Sir Brian Lahore's identification about there's a divide between the rural communities and the urban communities, and events like this support closing that gap. If we look at the Central District's field days over in Fielding and the rural games here in Manawatu, those two events together, we're talking 40 to 100,000 people, although Central Field Days is over 3 days. I think it would be a huge mistake for us not to continue supporting the great work that the Trust does in whatever shape or form that looks like. And if we were going to refer back to the current policy as it sits, I doubt we'd get 40,000 sheep in for a $30,000 budget. So I'm fully supportive of this. Thank you.
Councillor Vaughan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Fitzgerald. I do have some concerns in this space, but I'm balancing those with what I know of the event space, which is there have been significant cost increases, maybe not quite to the 25% that's been mentioned, but I would also note in that the Rural Games Trust have always asked us for $100,000. We've, some might say, underfunded to this point, and we're maybe playing a little catch-up there. So I'm not against the amount. I'm a little bit nervous about the 5 years. But my reason for supporting this option with the 5 years in it is that I'm very conscious that we lured the games here. And we didn't, it wasn't just our winning smiles and sunny personalities that brought it to Palmerston North. Some of that was funding. It's also having the most amazing open space in the middle of our city, a fantastic location that genuinely speaks to the mission and values of the Rural Games. But money speaks in the events space. And that's not the only event that we've lured here. And I will continue to roll out my winning smile, but I'll continue to know that we need to back that with some cash. So on that basis, I'm happy to support this going forward to the annual budget debate, where I'm sure we might do some finessing around the numbers if needs be. Thank you.
All right, thank you, councillors. Just as a right of reply, and I think Councillor Bowen sort of made comment that the Trust is actually, because there's been a few comments, oh, there's a big increase and everything else. And yes, it is. It's because previous internal officer decisions, and I'd have to say some policies, have dictated where we've got to. So they've always asked for this level of funding. It's nothing new from their side anyway. And perhaps it hasn't been well publicised to this table. I really understand your issues or precedent around 5 years. I sort of share a little bit of that as well. But we have funded some other organisations which we really believe should be key to our success, and SEED is one of them. So that's another example of this actually happening. Look, many of you said, should we be funding this? Actually, it's all around level of risk. Again, I come to that many times, and people have lower levels of risk and people have slightly higher levels of risk. Is this a risk? Does it fit some of our goals? Perhaps the transparency of how they connect to some of those goals probably needs to be teased out a bit more, and that's a challenge for the Trust and our officers. But absolutely, I think it does. The space that it comes into, Te Marae Hine, the square, is perfect for this. The trees. I've heard from the tree climbers that we have the best trees in a CBD or central city in New Zealand. They love it. They absolutely love it. So, we either back this or we don't back this, and I think some of you have already said that. if it succeeds, I do want to say to the Trust and our officers that that economic impact really does need to be available. But they're spending 1.3 million on putting this on. My basic math would say there is some significant impact here. We have our hospitality sector, we have the closeness to accommodation and retail all around us. We have the people coming in from the schools side, so it's a 3-day event now. And of course we have the games themselves on the Saturday and Sunday. So look, please, I do ask you to look at it and really as a former event manager and having played in a bit of this space, I'd have to say I don't mind politicising the policy settings because I believe they're massively wrong. This is a starting point for major events in other cities. You went to Tauranga, you went to Hamilton, you went to Nelson, you go to Dunedin, this is where you're starting. So you might need to, councillors, somebody need to look at what actually is happening outside the city. So please ask you to back it if you want this here. If you don't want it here, then don't back it. Thank you. We will vote. And that is passed, 13 votes for and 2 against. All right, we will move now to we have number 8, which is around our elected member meeting attendance stats. It is a memo for noting, and also our council submission on the legislation bill for weather emergency recovery. Again, that is for noting. I'm quite happy to take those together because they are for noting, and we can, if the room is happy with that, I'm quite happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Hancock. Do the officers need to speak to it? No. So they're on pages 29 and 33 of your papers. Quite happy to, if anybody wants, there's no questions for those. Okay, and the meeting attendance obviously is historical, and it was important that we showed you what was put to the Minister around, especially in response to recent events, the Emergency Management Bill. So, and that went to Minister McAnulty. So, I'm happy to move those, seconded by Councillor Hancock. If there's no further comments, we will vote, please. That's passed, 14 votes for and none against. Thank you. All right. We now move to our council work schedule, which is number 10 on page 41 of our papers. And I'll open that up for any comments. And there's a lot there, but there's a lot to do. So, look, I'm happy to move our council work schedule that we receive it. Thank you, Councillor Bowen, as a seconder. Our work schedule dated the 3rd of May 2023. Are there any comments? There being none, we will vote. And that has passed, 15 votes for, none against. Thank you. All right, we now go to committee recommendations through the month, and it's from our Culture and Sport Committee of the 19th of April 2023. I'll ask the Chair to speak to this. Councillor Bowen.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to present the recommendations from Part 1 Culture and Sport Committee on the 19th of April 2023 for adoption, please.
And seconded by Councillor Meehan. Thank you. Any matters arising? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to indicate I continue to hold a level of discomfort around this recommendation that has come to us, not only for the wording, which I feel is quite unclear, but the intent, which, to my view, undermines what was good process that we've worked to establish around facility-based decisions. As you'll recall from the debate, there were two paths. Both of those paths took us to the LTP. The alternate path just gets us a bit more information along the way, and I'd much prefer that we stay on that path, which is consistent with our process. And as such, I'll be voting against this because I don't think we should be short-circuiting that and jumping straight to LTP. Thank you.
Councillor Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And your colleagues might recall that I thought it was a missed opportunity that we weren't able to actually hear from the three bowling clubs at the last sitting. I've since been able to garner some feedback from one such club, and the question that he proposed to me was, would the council actually fund a non-council owned property bowling club, for which I obviously didn't have an answer, but it certainly raised some concerns for me. Yeah, I'm going to struggle with committing $300,000 in the LTP when we actually haven't heard from all the stakeholders in the group, so thank you.
Councillor Dennison.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. But like Councillor Barrett, actually, the pathway to get to the long-term plan and jumping fences to get this on the table now, I think, was poor process. And this decision I'll also oppose at this point because I believe what the officer's report was part of good process, that was agreed process, and therefore, yeah, I think this is a poor recommendation. The other point, very valid point that Councillor Barrett brought up in committee is that you could swap out bowling in this recommendation and put gym sports or the aquatic groups that have been wanting aquatic spaces. And so for consistency, I just want to set a precedent where one comes out and we get all excited and trying to save the day type of thing when there was nothing to save. We've been very supportive of the bowling community and they need to work out their preferences themselves. And I can admit and accept's probably a better word, that they may need some assistance to do that. But that should not be forced, and I'd rather prefer to see what was the recommendations proposed in that report come forward to council, and I'd be happy to take the time for that to happen. I'm opposing this recommendation, Mr Mayor. Thank you.
Councillor Wood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I supported this recommendation and put it forward to start with, and I continue to support it for a few simple reasons. The report we had, which we spent $50,000 on, said that all three locations were suitable, but it raised two simple questions. One is what location will it go to, and two is how will they access external funding, to which this recommendation helps achieve both. It said that every one of those locations was suitable for council to invest our funding into. So what we are saying today is that we expect the bowling clubs to make a decision. We are putting a price tag effectively on that decision that if it is not made at the time, then they put that funding at risk. So there is a distinction between what we're doing. If we refer it to the long-term plan, we are having to consciously look at putting it in. If we commit it into the long-term plan, we have to consciously look at taking it out. So there is a difference in the way that we approach this, and I would rather we took the approach of having to make a conscious decision to take this out of the long-term plan if they do not make a decision on the location and if they do not come to the table with how they are going to access that external funding. But I'd like to address a few of the concerns that people had, and I addressed these last time, and I recognise I might not change anybody's mind, but I feel it's worth airing in the chamber anyway. In terms of process/precedent, this could not just be swapped with aquatics or gym sports or anything else, because those don't have a fully done feasibility study in front of us that tell us that all of those locations are suitable. I'm not suggesting that anybody who just wanders into the chamber and says, I want a brand new pool, we commit to funding. But if somebody wanders into the chamber and says, I've got 3 locations for a brand new pool, you've done a 50 grand assessment that says all 3 of those locations are good for a brand new pool, yeah, I would consider committing that funding to put that brand new pool in. So this is not just us blazingly throwing caution to the wind. We have taken a very cautious approach. How much more information could you possibly need that this is needed in our community? How much more information could you possibly want, aside from the location? And that is what this helps force a decision to be made on. We are lighting the fire under the bowling clubs and requesting that they bring us a location by the time we get to the long-term plan. So, yeah, it's quite simple, really. We've had a good reception. Everybody I've spoken to has said how baffling it is that we can do a report like this and lead to no recommendation other than they come to the long-term plan and ask us for money. It simply baffles the mind. So, in fact, I think it's Councillor Hancock who says that quite often. So it does simply baffle the mind how we end up in this position. So let's actually take a stance, let's make a decision, let's do something rather than asking them to come back and request more money from us in a year's time. Let's tell them you've got the money, make the decision, and we will look at it at the time. In terms of the wording, just very quickly, the advice I received from officers at the time is that was the appropriate wording. The advice I've seen after the time from officers has also been that is the appropriate wording. So I recognise that some councillors aren't comfortable with it, and that's your own decision, but the advice I've had is that the wording is appropriate, and that the reason that we make it very clear is that we don't give bowling clubs the wrong impression that they have 100% got the money, because of course everything gets redebated at the long-term planning process, but not everybody understands that process as well as the councillors in the chamber, so it is important we clarify that will happen there. But I would rather we have to consciously take this out at the long-term plan, rather than we have to consciously put this in at the long-term plan. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillors, look, I'm going to support this. I'm intrigued that we're relitigating it, but that's fine. We do that occasionally in this chamber. Look, this is process fatigue for these people. Really? For one of the councillors that does go to sporting events, I got hugged by some of them. I got phone calls and I got texts to say, thank you for making a decision. They struggled with the whole process, and it has been, it's an agreed process. I'll debate that for the length of time. For those that have been around the room a bit longer, you can remember they surrendered a lease. I'm talking bowls and generically here. Surrendered a lease. They didn't need to do that, and they did, and they've allowed that to allow us to do some housing. Perhaps they would have been wiser to get in writing from the council of the day that there would be some sort of level of support for bowls going forward. They didn't, thinking they'd trust us. So people, look, I get that people want the process thing. This is process overload. The feasibility study said it needs to happen. We have lit the fire, and you will find a site and a champion will come out of this. If we continue to go on to the LTP, knowing that, yes, we probably will do something, but it fits the process and it's ticked the boxes and everybody's level of risk is happy and we've done the red tape to death, we mightn't have bowls clubs left because they'll have given up. So please support this. I can't see a huge level of risk other than you don't quite know where the site will be. They will sort that. And I'm very confident that that fire's been lit and they won't let it go now. So just to give you an inkling, there is a new green being opened in the next couple of weeks at the North End Club, and you've all been invited. I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Councillor Hapara.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a very brief comment from me. I'm fully supportive of this recommendation. We have been discussing this, I want to say, between 8 and 10 years around this council table, so it's not a new thing. Councillor Dennison talked out that we could swap out swimming and we could swap out gym sports, but actually bowls is the one that actually we've been discussing this for a long time with this community. This is really about where it's going to be, whether it's going to be in Takaro, Palms North or North End, and we're not going to want to make that decision. It was going to be wanting to be made that decision by that community. So that's really what this was trying to do, was trying to enable them to help them make that decision. So that's what this was about, to help them make that decision, not for us to do it for them. So I'm fully supportive of this recommendation going forward. We've discussed it with them for a long time, and it's time now to help them go forward and enable them to go forward for the future, for bowls, for a covered green. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Hancock.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and like other speakers, I'm not going to support this. And the reason for that is this actually undermines the regional sports facility plan and all the processes that underpin that to create a coherent sporting strategy and venues for our city and the wider region. I'm going to refer to what we did in council in my absence as it's an overreach, it's unnecessary interference, and it is unnecessarily coercive in terms of the bowling clubs. So please don't support this, allow process to take its course. Thank you.
Councillor Meehan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd love to echo what Councillor Wood said, but I wouldn't even attempt it. I'll fully support this. I'm a bit taken back with some of what's been said about process and all the rest of it. This has been on the books. The debate is whether it's 10 years or 15 years, but it's thereabouts. It couldn't be swapped out for any of the others, gym sports, aquatics or anything else, as it's been said. The initial plan of this was to give a push to bowls. They've struggled to come up with a decision where they want it. This was to give them a push. And I think that with this recommendation, that will succeed. The push will succeed. Sport Manawatu have said they're going to get alongside them and work with them. I believe we'll have the result by the time it comes around for debate again. And like it's been said, it's do we leave it in, do we take it out? And I think that's a really easy decision, and we've dangled the carrot and said to them, we've done our part, now you do yours. And I think that's the best thing we can do for them after this much time. Thank you.
Councillor Naylor.
Thank you. I'm a little bit baffled as to how anyone who has read that feasibility study could support this recommendation. The feasibility study that we paid $50,000 for recommended that we don't do what's in front of us. It recommended that some further conversations and some further plan development should happen first. It was also our officers' good advice that we take a cautious approach and have those conversations first. I cannot see how lighting a fire under any bowling club could be beneficial in any way other than burning some things. I think constructive conversations and sensible planning is a much better way forward, and it respects the process and it respects the regional services plan that we have supported. So I definitely will not be supporting this recommendation.
Councillor Arnott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Chamber, good morning. I certainly will be supporting this, and I think it's long overdue. Also, I'll be supporting this in 1953, Queen's coronation, I should say, and this weekend with the King's coronation. In 53, my great-grandfather Eric and his twin brother Les donated to the Palmerston North bowling community the Coronation Cup. And so bowls has long been in my family. Haven't ever played yet myself, but one day. So I certainly will be supporting this. Thank you.
Councillor Zabellan.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I just wanted to pick up on something that Councillor Naylor sort of touched on there, which was that it's not actually just a simple matter of where it's going to be. One of our requirements was that the clubs would develop a joint strategic development plan. So it's not just about where it's going to be, it's about how it's going to run, how it's going to operate, how it's going to be funded and managed going forward. And there was signalled in the feasibility study that that was the key work that would be required to go forward if we were to continue to fund that. And so that's our requirement. If any of these clubs were in a position to raise the funds themselves that have a covered green by now or in the works without having to do that sort of work. So if that's sort of reflecting as well what Councillor Hancock was saying, we have a regional regional sports facility plan, and they're trying to build a cohesive strategic development plan across these different codes. To my mind, I don't see how this impedes that. There's still amount of time for the bowling clubs to actually put that work in and do that strategic work, as well as just choose a location. If we say it's black and white like that, then it seems a bit ludicrous, but it isn't. It's the requirements that we've requested to show that this is a good and sound investment for us. That is still coming. I feel like the motivation is there, where they can see a light at the end of the tunnel. If they collaborate and do this work, then they'll get the result that they're looking for. They may well get the result that they're looking for. And I don't see how this recommendation impedes that from happening. To my mind, judging from what I've heard from the Mayor about the reception that this recommendation has had in the bowling community, that this would be a motivating and encouraging factor to complete that strategic work and choose a location. I guess I'm sitting on the fence, really. I'm not convinced either way that this would be a disaster. I'm not convinced that it would get us the result that we want. Probably not a very useful comment, but I don't think it's very as simple as saying, hey, just choose the location and Bob's your uncle. No. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Right, a reply back to you, Councillor. Oh, sorry. Did you just...
I can levitate if that helps.
I thought that was your seat. Councillor Finlay, you're obviously, you're in now. Councillor Finlay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've got quite a good memory of the bowling clubs coming to us over the last few years about what they want to do and how they want to do it. And they've always been quite divided, and they've argued and bickered a bit. But I've had I don't know how many phone calls and people coming up to me at another public meeting just recently. 3 people come up to me from from the 3 clubs congratulating council on actually motivating the clubs to get together and make a decision. And that's from the 3 different clubs. They're all now doing it. They're actually getting together, forming a subcommittee, getting the work done, and we've motivated. We put the lolly out there, we put the carrot out in front of them. They're taking the carrot and they're working on it. Think about what the bowling community in this city has done for the city. They gave up Terrace End Bowling Club, and the council is going to split that up and sell that off into sections and make a little bit of money. I'm quite sure we'll make more than the $300,000 out of those sections that we're selling. Now, the bowling clubs did not have to decide to do that. They could have carried on fighting the way they were going, and they could have kept Terrace End going, and they had every right to do so. But they recognised the problem, and they got together, and Terrace End and Northern got together, and they amalgamated and gave back the city that bit of land which we're going to make some money out of. And for us to look at it now and say, oh, $300,000 is too much. Well, I'm sorry, it's not. Those bowling clubs are very able to raise the rest of the funds. When you have a look at what they've done already on their own rights, they've put in turfs without coming to us. They've done alterations without coming to us. Now they've come to us and asked us to do something which is going to be nationally beneficial to our city. And how can we bicker over it? This city is going to gain from it. Just as an afterthought, think about this. If the Commonwealth Games do come to New Zealand and are split across the country, you imagine if the bowls came to Palmerston North because we had Govert Greens, how much benefit and publicity that would be. I think we go ahead with this as soon as we can and support the clubs and get the clubs to work together and go and see Palmerston North have a Govert Greens.
All right, now back to you, Councillor, for right of reply.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. Colleagues, I was in two minds as to whether I would even move this recommendation as the chair. I decided I would because it was a close debate and I thought it deserved to be reheard at council. But I don't support it. I don't support it not because I'm against bowls, clearly. We all love bowls. And not because people haven't rang to say how marvellous the decision was, because they certainly have. I just would also note that tennis have also been on the phone, noting their seniors competition numbers, which are significantly greater than bowls. So this isn't about picking winners. For me, this is about process. And actually, the report that came to council identified significant gaps, one of which was location, absolutely, but other gaps around governance structure and ability to apply for funding. And by focusing on location as the issue, which is what this recommendation does, we do actually impede the bowls clubs from making good use of the time that they have in the next 12 months before the report that is due back to committee to inform the LTP conversation returns. And members might not recall that those were the recommendations that were accepted under delegation at committee, not just to receive the report, but to request an additional report from the CE to inform this decision, which would give us the opportunity for council officers and Sport Manawatu to have worked with the bowls clubs to tick off all of those issues. Yes, location, but also governance structure, also funding structures and their ability to apply for external funding. Because let's be clear, $300,000 does not get them a covered green. It gets them a quarter of a covered green, which would not attract the Commonwealth Games. So, if we want an actual covered green, we need to enable them to apply for funding. And on that basis, I won't support this, and I'd urge you not to either. It's bad process. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, I would just like to say that there were some noises made while Councillor Bowen was speaking that I thought were disrespectful.
Thank you, Councillor. All right, we will vote. And that has failed. 7 votes for and 8 against. All right. We will now go to exclude the public and we'll then break. So I will look to, for reasons on the agenda papers shown on the screen there, we will now look to move to part 2. And we note that we've got 2 externals that will be permitted to join the meeting on item 14 to speak to the report and answer questions. I'm happy to move that. I have a seconder, please. Oh, thank you, Councillor Hancock. Are there any comments to that? There being none, we will vote, please. Okay, that's passed. 15 votes for and none against. We'll be back in the chamber at 22:11 people. Thank you.